Not everyone is born with a straight path to walk. Ariyana Blair grew up in a rundown rental apartment on the south side of Atlanta, where streetlights flickered, rats slipped through window cracks, and people learned how to survive long before they learned how to love. She was the only daughter of a mother who worked 3 jobs, and a father whose name never made it onto her birth certificate. At 19, Ariana got pregnant, a mistake without a name, but with consequences that carved themselves into her body for life. She attended a local community college, the kind where students balanced textbooks with toddlers, and professors taught while calculating overdue bills. By day, she studied. By night, she waitressed. Came home at 11 p.m., kissed her baby boy on the forehead, and grabbed a few hours of sleep before doing it all over again. Each morning, she wore faded jeans, a torn backpack, dropped her son off at daycare, and caught the bus to campus. No lipstick, no perfume. No one looked at her for more than 2 seconds. Ariana was a blur in a system no one bothered to notice was breaking. She didn't smoke, didn't party, didn't fight, but she didn't trust easily, didn't wait for anyone, didn't dream beyond next month's rent. Ariana didn't think she was broken. She just felt like she was drifting, like the last dead leaf at the end of the season. Not quite fallen, but no longer green enough to hold on. Then Professor Daniel Whitmore looked at her. Just once. Longer than necessary. Not rude. Not obvious. Just long enough for her to realize she'd been seen. And for the first time in years, she wanted to be seen. Daniel Whitmore taught introduction to sociology. He dressed simply, kept his hair short, tall but never imposing. His voice was even, not too soft, not too loud, as if everything in the world could be broken down rationally, if you just had the right lens. Ariana sat in the third row, next to the wall, quiet, rarely speaking. He noticed her by the second week, not because she was brilliant, but because she listened like someone who didn't want to learn, just needed to survive, and sometimes smiled, sadly, at things no one else thought were sad. One day after class, Daniel approached. Your essay, it's not polished, but it's honest. You've seen more than most kids here. Ariana didn't know how to respond. She just nodded. As she turned away, he added, sometimes writing is the only way some of us stay alive. That line followed her home. In the weeks that followed, Daniel sent emails about missed notes. Sometimes scribbled comments on her papers. You think differently. Don't underestimate that. Ariana didn't fully trust him, but breathing felt easier around someone who didn't look at her like she was trash, didn't treat her like a burden. One rainy afternoon after class, Daniel saw her standing under the awning, no jacket, clutching her bag. He stepped outside, handed her an umbrella. No offer, no ride, just an action, simple, human, but enough to stick. A week later, she started lingering after class. One afternoon, Daniel handed her a book titled Trauma Psychology and said, no one's born strong, but some of us survive by pretending we are. This time, Ariana looked him in the eyes and didn't leave early. She never called it love, not even close. But at that moment, where her son was burning with a fever at home, her bank account held $42, and finals were around the corner. Having someone like Daniel notice her felt like standing under a warm streetlight in a city where every block had gone dark. And so she stepped closer, slowly, but she stepped. At first, it was just a few minutes after class, asking questions, requesting extra reading, or pretending to. Then Daniel said she could send her essays in advance if she wanted early feedback. She did. The first was on how poverty shapes behavior. The second, just a raw paragraph written at 2 a.m., while her son coughed in the other room and she couldn't sleep. Daniel replied at 3:12 a.m. No comments, no grades, just one sentence. I see you. Then came the texts, not through the school email anymore. His personal number. He messaged her after shifts, at the bus stop, when she was fresh out of the shower, hair still damp, staring at an inbox that never had her name in it. One day, Daniel invited her into his office. He didn't close the door. Not at first. He showed her an academic article about single black mothers and dropout rates. He spoke about his own mother, a teacher who raised two sons alone when his father left. His voice was steady, but his gaze lingered, and when she left, his hand brushed the small of her back. Next time, the door was closed. They didn't sleep together immediately, just longer touches. One night, he gave her a ride home when her car broke down. Another night, he waited outside her dorm with coffee. She refused the first time, accepted the third. They slept together on a rainy night. Her power was out. Her son was already asleep. Daniel said, "You don't have to be strong around me." She believed him. She let him undress her, not because she thought he loved her, but because she wanted for once to be the woman he chose, even if only for one night. The next morning, after Daniel left without saying much, Ariyana sat in front of the mirror and asked herself, will this time be different? She didn't know, but she wanted to believe it. Her name was Melissa Whitmore, Daniel's legal wife, mother of his twin daughters, human resources director at a mid-sized law firm. She wore expensive watches, season-matched lipstick, and had the kind of gaze that could split a lie in half before it left her lips. Melissa didn't find out because Daniel slipped up. She noticed because he became too kind. He stared at his phone too long, longer than he listened at dinner. He smiled at texts, then erased them. At first, she thought it was a female coworker, until she saw the name Ariyana Blair on a class roster Daniel had accidentally left open. Melissa didn't explode, at least not at first. She printed out a photo. Ariyana, standing beside Daniel in the parking lot, laughing, folded it in half, put it in her bag, drove to campus. Ariyana was in the courtyard when Melissa arrived, heels clicking across the pavement. Her perfume hit first. Cool, thick, metallic, like chilled steel. Ariyana turned. She saw the woman. She knew, immediately, that this was the wife. Melissa didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't ask. She walked up slowly, scanning Ariyana from head to toe, like evaluating a used product returned without a receipt. Then slapped her. Not hard, but perfectly placed. I don't even know who you are, but you better know who I am. She didn't raise her voice. Her eyes did the rest. People started watching. Someone almost stepped in, but Melissa was already walking away. Before she reached her car, she turned back and said, "I'll be speaking to the dean. What I say depends on how fast you disappear." Ariyana stood still. Her cheek burned, but inside, she felt cold. She knew Daniel wouldn't protect her. Not from a woman like that. Not from words that could kill scholarships with a single email. She called him that night. He didn't answer. She texted. No reply. She sat beside her child, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it was a well. And the more she stared, the further she fell. The next day, she withdrew from class, vanished from campus. No one asked, but Melissa didn't know. What she thought was the ending was only the beginning. The meeting happened on a gray afternoon. No rain, just the kind of sky that made silence feel heavier. Ariyana texted Melissa after several sleepless nights. "I'm not sorry, but I need to talk." She didn't expect a reply, but Melissa responded with one word. Park. They met at a small, quiet city park. No cameras, no witnesses. No one knew the conversation took place except them. Melissa arrived first, sitting on a stone bench, dark sunglasses on, water bottle in hand, coat zipped up, prepared for both the weather and the woman. Ariyana came later. No makeup, no mascara, just a face that looked a little older than it used to. When she sat down, there was no greeting, no handshake, only a long, loaded stare, like two forces who had already lost too much to pretend civility. Melissa spoke first. "I didn't want to see you, but I wanted to look at the face of the woman who made my daughter motherless." Ariyana clenched her fists, said nothing. They sat for minutes in a silence that grew roots. Then came the words. Sharp, cold, deliberate. Homewrecker. Trash. Shameless. And then, "Who do you think you are? You think he loved you? He pitied you. A girl from the gutter who mistook charity for romance." Ariyana stood. She didn't scream, didn't lash out. She spoke quietly. "You can call me anything, but I was someone to the man you lost." Melissa stood, too. They shoved each other. No one knew who pushed first. But somewhere in the tangle, a branch snapped, a shoe slipped, and Melissa fell backward, her head hitting the concrete edge of a planter. No screams, no footsteps, just a thin line of blood leaking from the back of her skull. Red, quiet, and painfully real. Ariyana froze, stepped back, then dropped to her knees, shook Melissa's shoulders. No response. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open. No breath. She looked around. No one. Wind picked up, leaves scattered, and, for the first time in her life, Ariyana knew what it meant to take a life. Ariyana didn't remember what time she called Daniel. She only knew that by the time she heard his voice on the other end, she wasn't shaking anymore. No crying. No screaming. Just 2 words. She's dead. Daniel arrived at the park in 18 minutes. She was still sitting there, on the grass, eyes unfocused, staring at the body a few feet away, as if it had nothing to do with her. Even though she knew her own hands had pushed, Daniel said nothing when he saw Melissa lying there. He stood for a few seconds, then asked, "Did anyone see?" Ariyana shook her head. They lifted Melissa's body into the back seat of Daniel's car, wrapped it in a large towel he'd brought from home. There was blood, not much, but enough to haunt. Ariyana vomited while holding her legs. Daniel looked away. Neither spoke of it. They drove out of the city to an abandoned marsh Daniel once fished in during college. No cameras, no streetlights, no neighbors. They dug the hole with an old shovel from a secondhand shop. The soil was wet, soft, smelling of moss and rot. Daniel dug as he spoke, not to her, but to himself. This wasn't part of the plan, but we don't have a choice anymore. When the body was buried, they burned everything. Gloves, towels, rags, bloody wipes, trash bags. The burner phone Ariyana had used to message Melissa was dismantled, battery tossed into the swamp. On the way back, Daniel stopped at a gas station. He bought wet wipes and 2 cans of soda. She sat still in the car. Her eyes weren't guilty, weren't afraid, just empty, like someone who had quietly stopped being themselves. They didn't speak on the drive home. Daniel dropped her off at her old apartment. Before leaving, he said, "From now on, no one knows. No one, no matter what happens." She nodded. He left. Ariyana sat on the floor, back against the door, hands in her hair. She didn't cry. No more tears. Because she had already crossed the point where crying meant anything. Life went on, at least on the surface. Ariyana returned to her job at a small bakery in a strip mall. She spoke less, stopped joking with customers, but she showed up for every shift, wore her gloves, wiped tables, worked like a machine. No one suspected a thing, because no one had ever really noticed her to begin with. Daniel went back to teaching. His eyes were a little more cautious, his smile thinner, but to the students, he was still Professor Whitmore, the man with polished shoes and polite words. They both lived, as if that night had never happened. Sometimes they texted a line or two. "You okay?" "Yeah." Neither ever said Melissa's name. Neither dared to. 3 months passed like a bruise that hadn't healed. Faded maybe, but still sore when touched. Then, in early June, the news broke. A woman's body had been found near a northern marsh. Decomposed, but identifiable by dental records and DNA. The name lit up the morning broadcast. Melissa Whitmore, confirmed deceased. Ariyana dropped her glass. Her hand shook. She said nothing, just stared at the television screen in the bakery, blinking between commercials. Daniel turned off his phone for 2 days. Didn't show up to teach. Didn't show up anywhere. Police reopened the case. From missing person to homicide, the net began to tighten. Old camera footage, phone logs, whispers from months ago, now revisited, studied, compared. Ariyana understood. That night hadn't ended. It had only paused. Melissa's body was found by a local fisherman. He called the police after spotting something floating between the reeds. Something that didn't look like a dead fish and didn't smell like one either. Then came the familiar rhythm. Crime scene tape, flashing lights, forensics in white suits that looked like ghosts in an open field. News cameras arrived within 30 minutes. Once the identity was confirmed, police held a press conference. The name Daniel Whitmore came back into circulation. Teacher, husband of the deceased. The media began circling. Daniel played calm, taught his classes, assigned readings, but he wasn't sleeping. He took down Melissa's photo from his desk, changed his email passwords, quietly tried to delete old chats with Ariyana, or at least tried to, but the system had backups. Messages, GPS logs, campus surveillance, the shovel purchase, the gloves. All of it began to surface again, handled now by people with time, training, and no need to sleep. Ariyana felt the shift. Her bakery manager told her maybe she should take a few days off. An old co-worker texted her, "Didn't you used to know Melissa?" She didn't respond. Each morning, she no longer thought about the next day. Only one question circled her head. Is today the day they say my name? She started packing, wiping her computer, selling what she didn't need. Not panicking, just that numb calm, like someone standing in front of a tidal wave. Not running, just bracing. Daniel called one night. His voice low, cracked. If they ask, don't say anything. You don't talk. I don't talk. We're fine, as long as no one panics. Ariyana hung up without replying. For the first time, she heard the voice of someone truly afraid. As for her, she felt only one thing. The end, coming step by step. Not fast, but certain. The investigation moved from reopened to active focus. Police reviewed every camera near the park on the day Melissa was last seen. The footage wasn't clear. Low light, grainy resolution, but clear enough to show two female figures sitting across from each other. One stood, a sudden shove, an unnatural movement. Then static. Digital forensics restored the midsection. Not enough to identify a face, but the clothing, the hair, the posture, they matched. A phone records request was sent to the carrier. Text history between Daniel and Ariyana. One burner number, registered under a fake name, sent a single message to Melissa. On the very day she vanished. I'm not sorry, but I need to talk. A fingerprint found on a pair of gloves, bought at a store near the marsh, partially matched Ariana's file from the college student system. Each piece on its own, maybe nothing, but placed side by side, no longer coincidence. Daniel was summoned for questioning. He tried to stay calm, brought a lawyer, but the questions kept getting sharper, and Daniel began to shrink into silence. Ariyana received her summons 3 days later. She didn't finish reading it, folded it, set it down on the table. She knew, when the officers knocked, she didn't hide, didn't ask why. She opened the door and held out her wrists. They cuffed her in front of her son. He asked, "Where are you going, Mommy?" She didn't answer. She didn't cry. She just lowered her head, because tears, at this point, would save nothing. Daniel sat in the interrogation room with his lawyer beside him. Light blue shirt, hands folded on the table, trying to look calm, but his legs wouldn't stop trembling beneath the chair. The detective didn't yell, didn't threaten, just laid the evidence on the table. Surveillance footage, text messages, glove purchase receipts, phone data, typing patterns, location logs. Then the question, what do you know about the death of Melissa Whitmore? Daniel stayed silent. A minute, then two. The lawyer whispered something. He nodded and started to speak. Not much, not detailed, just enough to point, just enough to put Ariyana out front. He spoke about the argument in the park, about Melissa falling, hitting her head, about Ariyana calling him, panicked, about being pulled into the cover-up, about having no choice, about emotional distress. He used the phrase, victim of circumstance, but he never once said, I was wrong. When asked, did you knowingly help conceal a body? Daniel looked straight ahead and answered like someone who'd rehearsed the line 1,000 times. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just did what she told me. Ariyana later heard that recording, not in the jail, not on TV, but in her own head, playing over and over like a warped track. I just did what she told me. He'd once said he loved her, called her the only one who understands, told her, I won't leave you alone. And now, when it mattered most, He said as little as possible. The preliminary hearing took place 2 weeks later. Both were indicted, but only one name was read first. Ariyana Blair, primary offender. The women's correctional facility sat on the southern edge of the city, a flat, dry stretch of land that looked like an abandoned airfield. The gate was 3 meters tall, wrapped in barbed wire like a giant steel web. No trees, no shade, just peeling concrete walls and sunlight that stung your face. Ariyana arrived in a transport van. She didn't ask questions, didn't look out the window. Her hands were cuffed, but her heart had already let go. When the gate slammed shut behind her, the sound, metal against metal, wasn't just noise. It was a line drawn. Daniel had stopped calling. The public defender only said, "We'll try for a reduced sentence." And her mother, who had called 3 times after the arrest, had stopped texting. Ariyana was given her inmate number, hashtag 9427B. Cell 8, Block D, 2-person cell. Low ceiling, yellowing white walls. Steel frame bed, thin blanket, hard pillow, no mirror. Her cellmate was named Layla, 31, in for fraud. Didn't ask questions, didn't start conversation, just nodded when Ariyana entered, then turned her face to the wall, as if she were just another piece of furniture. The first day passed in silence. Dry rice, thin broth, 1 hour walking in a concrete yard, intake paperwork, uniform fitting, a rundown of rules, schedules, tone, eye contact. Everything had rhythm, had rules, and no room for tears. That night, Ariyana lay staring at the ceiling. No dreams, no thoughts, just the thump of her own heart, and the echo of steel as someone kicked a door down the hall. On day 3, she saw herself in the infirmary mirror. Hair tangled, eyes hollow, shoulders small. No longer a student, no longer a lover, no longer a mother, just someone surviving. Once, when asked her name, she answered, "I'm the girl who loved wrong," and stayed quiet too long. No one replied. A passing officer glanced at her and sighed, and that, maybe, was the part that hurt the most. Not the cell, not the sentence, but the way people started forgetting who she used to be before she became just another inmate. Ethan Miles was the new correctional officer assigned to Block D. He wasn't tall or intimidating like most in uniform. Slender build, brown hair, glasses, and a face that always looked like it was waiting for the end of a story you hadn't finished telling. They said he'd once studied sociology out of state, but dropped out after his sister died from an overdose. No one asked more. He didn't offer. Ethan was the kind of man who didn't make friends, but didn't make enemies either. He spoke enough, wrote enough, did his job exactly by the rules. Not less, not more. But there was one thing people noticed. He always seemed to notice those who were quiet longer than they should be. That's why he noticed Ariyana. It wasn't because she was beautiful or different. It was because she was so quiet. She didn't ask for anything, didn't complain, didn't explain. She existed in prison, like someone who had lived there long before ever stepping inside. The first time Ethan spoke to her was in the infirmary. She had a headache, picked up her medication. He was on shift handing it out. "Blair?" She nodded, didn't look up. He slid her the blister pack, then added a small pouch, 2 cold compresses. She glanced up just once. Didn't say thank you. He didn't need her to. After that, he didn't talk much. But when she was in the yard, he stood a little closer. One evening, when the temperature dropped suddenly, she found an extra blanket folded on her bed after cell check. No note, no explanation. She knew it was him, not because she saw, but because only someone who had lost something knew how to notice someone else's emptiness. Once, when the entire block went on lockdown for 3 days, Ariyana sat in her cell. No light, no sound, except for the echo of footsteps down the hall. She thought she'd break. That night, a small slip of paper came through the door. For words. Still here. Still breathing. No name. No signature. But she knew. It was Ethan. She didn't love him. Didn't wait for him. Didn't write him letters after lights out. But every time he passed by her cell, she knew she was still a person. Not completely stone. And sometimes, inside walls made of concrete and names forgotten. A look that doesn't pity you is the kindest thing anyone can give. Ariyana started to feel off around week 6. Foggy head, morning nausea, swollen chest. Her body felt like it was trying to send a message, one she didn't want to receive. She sat in the infirmary, staring at the faded paint on the wall, while the nurse placed the test stick on the table. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Too short to run. Too long to pretend she didn't know what was coming. The result came like a sentence. 2 lines. No doubt. She didn't argue. Didn't ask. Just stared at the stick, like it had dropped a curse straight into her lap. That night, she sat alone in her cell, hand resting on her belly. No prayers. No curses. Just a whisper. Why now? No one in the unit knew for sure who the father was. Just glances. Whispers. A rumor. A pregnant inmate. 3 days later, Ethan was suspended. No announcement. No hearing. One morning, he simply wasn't there. And Ariyana understood. News leaked. Headlines flared. Convicted killer pregnant by prison officer. The whole state buzzed. The department came under investigation. Ethan was wiped from the system, as if he'd never worked there at all. Ariyana didn't explain, didn't defend. When asked during a closed-room interview, "Did you consent?" She looked at the wall and said, "I don't know who I was back then." Back in her cell, she didn't cry. She just wrote 2 words on the back of her pregnancy report. Still alive? From that day on, she cradled her belly. Every night, her hand resting there. Not to protect, but to remind herself something was growing inside a place that had long since died. In the final months of her pregnancy, Ariyana was no longer allowed out to the yard often. The prison nurse suggested she stop working in the laundry. She didn't argue. She didn't thank her. She just nodded. Each day, she sat by the small barred window, watching the other women circle the cement yard in silence. Faces blank, arms hanging limp. They walked as if they were living, but their eyes looked like abandoned cars in an overgrown lot. No engine left, only rust. Ariyana thought if someone saw her from the outside, they'd see a pregnant inmate. Nothing more. They wouldn't see the desert inside her, so dry that when life started to bloom again, she was afraid to water it, in case it grew up inside her guilt. One night, she woke from the baby kicking. The pain wasn't sharp, but it was enough to sit her upright in bed, one hand on her belly, as if she could keep the child inside. Small, safe, unborn. In the dark, she didn't think of Ethan, not of Daniel, not of Melissa, only of the child growing inside her. And the question that came quietly, who will this baby call father? The next morning was routine health checks. When the nurse placed the stethoscope on her stomach, Ariyana looked at a crack on the wall. The same crack she stared at every day. But today it looked longer, and she understood. Some things never get fixed. They're just seen. 3 days later, Ariyana was granted permission to attend her final court hearing. No testimony, no debate. The lawyers had filed everything. She just had to sit there. She entered the courtroom with her belly heavy, hands resting on her lap. No one attended. No one objected. No one defended. The judge asked if she had anything to say. She shook her head, then paused, and nodded. She stood. No paper. No eye contact. Her voice wasn't shaky, but it wasn't strong either. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to be understood. I only hope, if someone ever remembers me, don't remember what I did. Remember that once, just once, I was seen as a person. No one responded. No one cried. Just the sound of the gavel and the official sentence. Unchanged, upholding the original ruling. She left the courtroom in silence, carrying nothing except the child inside her and a quiet truth. Some people don't need forgiveness. They just need to be looked at, one last time, as human. Ariyana gave birth on a rainy night. No family, no Ethan, just a tired nurse, an aging doctor, and the cold, metallic glow of the infirmary lights. The baby didn't cry at first, just moved slightly, then let out a soft breath, as if to say, it didn't choose this world, but would stay anyway. She didn't ask the gender, didn't name it. She just looked down at the small, warm body in her arms and thought, even if the world forgets her, Someone will carry her in their blood for the rest of their life. 3 days later, the child was taken outside, placed into Ethan's arms. He came not in uniform, not guard, just a man standing between two worlds, one that had closed and one that had just begun. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. Only a glance and a nod, the kind of nod people give when they've both survived something, and the rain has finally stopped. Then Ariyana returned to her cell, colder, quieter, but no longer hopeless. Each day, she folded a paper crane. On its belly, she wrote one small line. For the child. For myself. For breath. One more day. She didn't count the days until release. Didn't dream of mercy. She waited, like people wait for spring, not knowing when, only knowing. It will come. Out there, Ethan raised a child. No one knew where he lived. Only a P.O. box where Ariyana sent letters each month, each one holding a few lines, a folded crane, and things she couldn't say out loud. They weren't a family, but they weren't over either. Just a long, quiet ache that might one day give someone else a chance to start clean.